Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars, and you're watching episode 60 from the Luthier's Workbench. In this episode, I'm not going to be really giving you any tips or tricks or any ideas about how to build guitars and that sort of thing like I usually do. I'm going to get a little bit talky on you, and the reason is there's an article which just came out recently. It was published on the Washington Post's website. And I'll put a link down in the description below. Just click show more and you'll see the link. This was published on June 22nd, 2017. The article was written by a guy named Jeff Edgers, and the title of the article is Why My Guitar Gently Weeps. And the subhead, I think, sums up the whole content of the article, and that is the slow death of the six-string electric guitar. This is obviously going to be somewhat of a controversial article, and I've read through the article, and I have to say I pretty much agree with a lot of what it says. The article talks about how the market for the six-string electric guitar has shrunk fairly dramatically in recent years, and the author of the article has interviewed George Gruen, who owns Gruen Guitars, and if anybody out there who knows electric guitars knows that Gruen Guitars is one of the leaders. And I think that when George talks about the market, you've got to listen. So in this article, what they talk about is some of the reasons why the market has shrunk, and some of the ideas about what needs to be done to try to I don't think you can necessarily bring it back to what it used to be back in the heyday of the 60s and 70s, but we can certainly build it up to be stronger. And I thought I would give some of my thoughts, what I've experienced in the business of building and selling guitars, six-string electric guitars. And what I've observed mirrors a lot of what is said in the article. Basically, what has happened is the biggest market for electric guitars is shrinking. And that market was driven by the post-World War II baby boom generation. Now, the electric guitar has been around since the 30s, but it really started to become popular in the early 60s through the 70s. And it was that generation, the baby boom generation, those folks were born between 1945, the end of World War II, and 1965. And when the oldest members of that generation began to reach their teenage years, that was the late 50s, early 60s. And rock music was becoming popular. And of course, rock music was fueled by the electric guitar. So those kids who were listening to that music wanted to emulate the rock stars, the people that they thought of as heroes. And they started to purchase electric guitars in large quantities based on what they saw their guitar heroes playing. So the Eric Claptons, Jeff Becks, Jimmy Pages, Jimi Hendrix, the list is enormously long. What they saw those guys playing is what they would go out and buy. And because there were so many in that generation, the sales of guitars went through the roof. And in fact, when you look at the market for all kinds of goods, whether it's guitars, drums, basses, amplifiers, but then you look into other things like clothing, TV sets, radios, stereos, 8-track tape players, cassette players, all that stuff. It just went through the roof because that generation was consuming, and it was consuming in enormous quantities. Well, starting in about probably, I don't know for sure, I don't have numbers in front of me to refer to, but I'm guessing at around probably 1985, 86, we'll say the late 80s, the market began to slow down. The sales of electric guitars began to slow down a little bit. And I think part of that is because there are a number of factors that came in that occurred about the same time. First of all, The baby boom generation was starting to put their guitars away, and they were starting to focus on other things, raising children, careers, mortgages, car payments, all that kind of stuff. And so the electric guitar sort of took a back seat. And the generations that came up behind the baby boomers, not only are they a lot smaller in size, but their taste in things began to change. And because we know that the musical styles, whatever is popular, drives the sale of musical instruments, we know that as kids started listening to more rap, hip hop, and electronic music, that the sale of guitars was going to suffer as a result. And I live in a neighborhood that's filled with a lot of teenagers, and all they listen to is hip hop. They pay no attention to any guitar-driven type rock music. I know that there's a lot of kids who listen to some of the expanding genre of heavy metal music, but they're not as many of them, and it's definitely shrinking in size. And one of the ways that we've tried to increase the sale of guitars is to reach that audience and sell them the 7, 8, 9 string multi-scale guitars, and that's helped to some extent. But I don't think we're ever going to get back to the way it was back in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s. I just don't think there's enough people in the market to buy, to sustain those kind of numbers. So the sale of guitars annually has shrunk from 1.5 million instruments down to 1 million instruments. That's 500,000 guitars that are not being sold. So, and that market's probably going to continue to get smaller. And the problem is now there are more people making guitars than ever before, more guys like me. And I think the big part of the reason is technology has made it possible for a lot of guys like me to make guitars, especially 6-string solid body electric guitars. So there's a lot of us. And that makes it difficult to compete. And I've noticed when I look at a lot of other guitar builders like myself out there, they tend to be pricing their guitars pretty high. And I think that, not only do we have to feed our bellies, but a lot of guys are trying to feed their egos. And as a result, they're asking $5,000-$6,000 for an electric guitar, when in truth, the materials and the components don't even hit $500. So, but I'm not going to get into that because it'll just start a whole controversy, and a lot of people are going to get upset, and I'm going to get a lot of nasty emails and that sort of thing. Another part of the reason why the market has shrunk, not only is it because the baby boom generation is moving away from playing guitars, when you look at what happened in 1985, we had the advent of the personal computer and the creation of the digital era. And all of a sudden, not only were kids looking at buying musical instruments that they wanted to play, but all of a sudden they wanted to buy computers, video game consoles, and then came laptops and tablet computers, and now smartphones. So all of a sudden a kid has to make a choice between whether to spend $800 on a cell phone or $800 on a guitar. And unfortunately, at this point in time, the phone is going to win out every single time. So I think if you want to sell more guitars, you have to make them more attractive price-wise. And that's what I've been trying to do, is keep the prices down, but at the same time still offering a really high-end, high-quality instrument. But and that seems to be working. So I think that's part of the key. Another key I think that would help improve the sale of guitars is, and this was mentioned in the article, we need more guitar heroes. And we need guitar heroes who are young, teenagers, who use the guitar to perform music that expresses their feelings and their emotions and creates an audience that is inspired by what they're doing. And right now, kids just aren't playing the guitar and recording it. Now, sure, you can go on YouTube and see all these kids playing guitars, but that's really more for the gee whiz, gee wow factor of look at this, 7-year-old who can play Eruption on an electric guitar. But there's really no kid who's breaking through in pop music who is up there on stage inspiring us with their guitar playing. And I don't necessarily think we need a new teenage Eddie Van Halen. We need kids who will write music that captivates that younger audience, and they see them up on stage with the guitar, and that inspires them to want to do the same thing. And I noticed that, and this was mentioned in the article too, that Fender has made a concerted effort to try and get kids to learn how to play guitar. And I see that happening a lot where with online guitar lessons and that sort of thing. But I think one of the problems is we're trying to encourage kids to play music that their grandpa listens to, rather than learning how to compose music that would allow them to express themselves to other kids just like them. And that's what needs to happen. Guitar heroes are not going to come from a bunch of kids learning how to play the music that their grandpa and their parents listen to. It needs to be music that's new and fresh, innovative, exciting, and performed with a guitar. So that's where I think a big improvement in the market could come from. So that's really pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. So I'll be curious to see what some of you think about this article. So I encourage you to read it, and then maybe post down in the comments below what your thoughts are. And I'll be, like I said, interested to see. So maybe in the next episode 61, I'll get back to doing some how-to videos and some tips on building guitars and get away from some of this controversial stuff. So, but until then, take care, and we'll see you in the next episode.